Hey everybody, welcome to The Press. It is Colonial Week, Charles Schwab Challenge Week to be more specific. I'm Ryan Ballingy, good to have you with us. Sorry for the late show this week. There's so much going on. You may or may not know what my day-to-day job is with the Golf News Net, but there is so much going on right now in my line of work. So it's taken me a little bit of time to kind of get back on track, get some things done, and trying to kind of plow through that as best we can. But that doesn't stop us from talking about the PGA Tour event this week, Charles Schwab Challenge at Colonial. This is a $9.9 million tournament, which is crazy that given that the field last week was as weak as it was, that had a bigger purse by $400,000. But hey, it is what it is. That doesn't really matter. You're still going to make a lot of money if you win, $1.782 million to be exact, 500 FedEx Cup points to the winner. You're going to get about 45, 46-ish points to the winner in official World Golf Ranking points. We are playing at Colonial Country Club once again. This Perry Maxwell was redone by Gil Hance not too long ago. Ben Griffin's the defending champion. It's a par 70 golf course, 7,289 yards, so about 100 yards shorter than last week, which was shortened by about 200 yards over last year. We have a pretty decent field here. I think it's 17 or 18 of the top 50 in the world competing this week. You know, we've got a pretty decent field here. Certainly a better field than last week. Not at the top tippy top, right? We don't have Scotty this week. We don't have Spieth. A couple of the Texan guys you would expect to typically be are not in this field, which is a little bit surprising, I think. But overall, I think you got a pretty solid field here. And I was kind of surprised, for example, Justin Thomas is playing in this. I was a little bit surprised Ludwig's playing in this, even though he's a Texas Tech guy. But I was a little surprised to see him in the field here this week. So we've got 132 players in total. It would have been a little bit higher than that. It would have been 135 if Brooks Koepka had played, but he withdrew. So the cascading effect of Brooks Koepka withdrawing leads to two guys not getting in the field because they have to add two guys to account for him, at least this year. So it's 132 exactly. You've got a whole bunch of guys who have no business being here down at the very bottom of the board. You know, guys who are typically invites because they've either won or they're Texans, like, you know, Ryan Palmer, Pat Gazire, Kevin Kistner, you know, guys that really shouldn't bother playing, but they're going to play because they're past champions and, you know, they get that opportunity for whatever reason. That's the way the tour is for some of these events. So we're going to look at the top of the table. We'll go through the guys kind of about 50, the one or less. That's about 20-ish guys. And then we will go over the model. All right, Ludwig Aubert is now sub 10 to 1. He started the week closer to 11 to 1. He's now sub 10 to 1 at many shops. I think that is a foolhardy play. He's, first of all, not the best closer, but he is playing well. I will give him that. He is absolutely playing well. He has also won multiple golf tournaments on tight golf courses like this one. He won at Sea Island, which can play pretty tight and is pretty short. And he's also won in Switzerland, which can play pretty tight and pretty short on the DP World Tour, the Omega European Masters. So I can understand the theory, but having this guy sub 10 to 1 is insane. I mean, if I'm not going to bet Scotty Scheffler, the best golfer in the world, at sub 3 to 1, I'm certainly not going to bet a guy who hardly wins at 10 to 1. Just not doing it. Russell Henley's 20 to 1. Justin Thomas does intrigue me at 23 to 1 because he played very well at the PGA Championship. This is kind of his time of year when he starts to show up a little bit better. I could be interested in him. He's the same price as Ricky Fowler, though, which I find fascinating. Fowler has been great for the last month and a half, and I think he'll continue to play well. He's played well here. You have to have a good short game here. He has that, and he's just been playing good golf overall. I think he could be very, very compelling here. I don't know how they're the same price, but they are. Robert McIntyre's 25 to 1. He's been playing very poorly by his standards, kind of fallen a little bit out of the official World Golf Ranking. Defending champions Ben Griffin, who's played very well the last month or so. I think he'd be worthwhile to look at him as a potential winner here. JJ Spawn kind of fits too. He won in Texas this year, albeit on a very different venue. He's 31 to 1. Not that I'm saying to pick him, but I get if you did. But again, kind of in the world of how are these guys priced the same, Hideki Matsuyama is also 31 to 1 at odds checker here. And I would pick Hideki over JJ Spawn 9 out of 10 times if you were going to go play in this range. But then you also have at 33 and 34 to 1 guys I would consider too. Alex Smalley, who has played great for the last month-ish, month and a half-ish, and he held up well at the PGA in the final group. He acquitted himself very well. Akshay Bhatia, who I think should love this place because he likes to work the ball, 34-1. I think they're all intriguing characters. I mean, I think if I'm going to pick someone between them, because I don't want to be one of those guys who's like, well, I just pick everybody and I'll be right. Don't do that. But I do think Ricky Fowler probably appeals to me more than Justin Thomas. And I do think of the players in that 30 to 35 range, probably Hideki is my preferred pick of those, just because of the quality of ball striking from Hideki. But, Spawn's been playing well. Smalley's been playing very well. And eventually he's going to get a win. It's going to happen. Akshay's already won this year. I do feel like he's a little bit of a downtrend. So I'd probably go with Hideki there. All right, some guys at 40-1. Keith Mitchell. You're going to fall in the Keith Mitchell trap this week. He played great last week. Every time you see him play, you go, how is this guy not in the top 10 in the world? It's because he doesn't putt very well. This is, to be fair, less of a putting tournament. We'll talk about that in course fits. It's way more emphasis on tee to green, which is right up Keith Mitchell's alley, so to see him drift a little bit from 35 to 40 is surprising. But he also doesn't win that much. So how do you bet on that guy? Keegan Bradley, 40-1. Sungjae is 43-1 with Ryo Hisetsune. I think they're both intriguing players. Hisetsune seems to have kind of lost whatever mojo he had earlier in the year to a degree. Sungjae shows up and then just disappears, and that's unbettable for me. Harry Hall, who has done very well here in the past, he has 45-1, and Pearson Cootie's 47-1. Of those guys I would not take. I'd rather go to Gary Woodland, who's a better horse for course play at 48-1. Yeah, I know. He's still very much going through the effects of PTSD and trying to kind of get himself better, and that may be something he has to manage for the rest of his life. Almost certainly will have to. But I think of these guys in that range, if I had to bet one person in the under 50-1 range, it would be Gary Woodland. Then second would be Ricky Fowler, probably. I don't love the price on Ricky Fowler, but that would be the two guys I would target this week. All right, so that said, why don't we look at the model for this week? So here's our top 10. We give this away for free every week. And basically we've talked about all those guys already that are in the top 10. And as you hear it, you won't be shocked to know that. Number 1 is Russell Henley, who I tend not to bet very much, and he has been struggling lately. Ludwig Aubert is number 2. Ben Griffin's number 3. And Griffin is an interesting price. I mean, I would bet Rick over him, but he is playing very well, and he does have a compelling price. Bobby Mack, 4th. J.J. Spawn, 5th. Harry Hall, 6th. Akshay, 7th. Justin Thomas, 8th. Keegan Bradley, 9th. Guy we haven't talked about is 10th. Sudarshan Yalamaraju, who I love this week. He has won on courses that play pretty tight. He did that on the Korn Ferry Tour last year. His game seems to travel everywhere. It's not a power game, particularly. It's an efficient game. Well, you need to be efficient around here. You're going to miss fairways. You need to be able to recover, have some imagination. I like what he brings to the table in that regard. A couple of guys that Ricky Fowler is 12th, by the way. And Hideki Matsuyama is 13th. Alex Smalley's 14th. So, and Gary Woodland's 16th. I know I'm giving away a lot of the rankings this week. But if you just went strictly by those, you'd feel pretty compelled to go in those directions that I've kind of been talking about already. I have Sudarshan Yalamaraju in the account. I will maybe even add on to him if he starts pretty hot tomorrow, to be honest with you. Keith Mitchell's 17th, by the way. Might as well just give you the whole list. The whole podcast would be me reading all 132 guys. That'd be a pretty funny episode. So that's the top 10. And if you want to join, get our full model and access to all of our tools, go to golfnewsnet.com. $40 for 1 year, $70 for 2 years, $100 for 3 years. Shout out to those of you, by the way, who sent me messages last week. I don't get messages every week. I obviously would love to hear from you. I make that invitation pretty well known, but I don't always hear from everybody. That's always a little surprising. But shout out to those of you who reached out. I appreciate it. The one guy reached out with one and done pick. I had Jordan Spieth down. I forgot that I picked him already. And I was ready to roll with Spieth last week, so I went with Michael Thorbjornsen. And after the first round, I felt like a genius because he was 7 under par. And then he missed the cut in a golf tournament where 30 under par won. So, don't get too proud. But I did mention Wyndham Clark in our betting article, our First Clicks article, did wind up winning. So that worked out pretty well. And we did talk about him here. Theory of the case worked. It's almost the opposite theory of the case this week, where you got to keep the ball in play. You can't just hit it anywhere. Yeah, there are slightly fewer trees than there used to be, but these are relatively small greens, certainly compared to last week. And it really is all about accuracy with your second shot. Perry Maxwell has some incredible greens on this property, And yeah, they've been buffed up a little bit to the modern day by Gil Hansen, his team. But there's still, the idea is still the same. You've got to hit to the right sections. You've got to be able, you can't just pound it anywhere and hit the green and have a chance to make what looks to be a straight in putt like you have a lot of time at Craig Ranch. This is a lot more difficult than that. So just keep that in mind when thinking about who you're gonna look at here this week. Some of my first clicks, I think I mentioned Yelam Raju, I mentioned Gary Woodland. I also would look at Brian Harman, who's been kind of blah this year. He's 66-1 last check, but he has been kind of blah this year. But I think this is the kind of game or place that works specifically for how he plays. And I kind of tend to favor the shorter hitter here this week. So, keep that in mind. Some more guys to mention. We'll go back into the pile here. But now we're not going to do every guy. Michael Thor Bjornsson, 55-1. I wish that he had a better week. I'd have jumped on it, but he went 10 points deeper this week because he missed the cut after shooting 7 under to start the tournament. Absolutely crazy. Matt Meisner played very well in Pebble Beach. I think he could be an interesting player. I will not bet him, but I do like him. Tom Kim is 63-1, kind of fits in that idea. Matt McCarty kind of fits into that idea. I would rather go after Ryan Gerard at 66-1 or Brian Harman at 66-1. Andrew Putnam has been bet down so much this week, probably because some people saw my model where he is right in there, I think 11th. Andrew Putnam was 100-1 to start the week. He is now 66-1. So he's taken on quite a bit of money relative to his interest. I think that's fascinating, and I think his game kind of works for here. I don't disagree with that play. Sahith Theegala has fallen off quite a bit after his good start. Steven Yeager is playing well. I just don't think his game works for here. Sudarshan Yelamraju, we mentioned, he is 84-1. I've seen him other please shop around for him. You can probably find him closer to 100 in certain places. I know there are going to be some people who are on Eric Cole this week because he's been playing okay lately, but this is a driving golf course, and he is a poor driver of the golf ball. Please do not get suckered into that. I like Michael Kim a little bit at 90-1. I may take even a little piece of him here. He is a cash machine. He is not playing spectacular golf right now, but he is playing capable golf. And capable golf can turn into spectacular golf without a whole lot of extra, right? If you're a guy who's just missing cuts all over the place, it's really hard to dig yourself out of there. But if you're comfortably T35 every week, and you haven't played your best golf, which I don't think he has, then you go into the week going, well, yeah, I just got to do this, just be a little better here, and all of a sudden I'm in this thing. And I think this kind of lines up for his game a little bit. Other than that, Zach Bosho, 125-1, had a great week last week. Best career finish on the PGA Tour. He's really doing pretty well for himself in this rookie year. I've had multiple people ask me, who is this guy? And he's Zach Bosho. He's a good player. I think you may want to start getting on that train. I'm not saying he's going to win this week, but I would be surprised if he doesn't get close to winning in like Detroit or the Twin Cities or the John Deere. And you won't get odds like this, but he might be a worthwhile play at 125-1. I kind of like that a little bit. Jackson Suber had a great week last week, 135-1. Don't know if that trend continues. I probably wouldn't keep going with it. I will go into Mark Hubbard a little bit here at 175-1. Still a very small bet because he had such a good chance to win in Myrtle Beach. The Dunes plays just like this. I mean, obviously different climates, different ecosystems, but I think his style works for here. I also think Tom Hoagie, if you wanted to pick one of those two guys, Hoagie or Hubbard, I wouldn't be against it. Hoagie seems to be playing a little bit better. He's just kind of on the fringes of getting into the playoffs right now. It seems to be turning around a little bit. Could be an intriguing player. I think his style of play works for a place like this. And then after that, you're starting to kind of get into some tougher guys to go and pick. I like Chandler Blanchet quite a bit. Enough to bet here, I don't know. I don't know if this is going to be his kind of golf course, but he is a good ball striker. Kita Nakajima, I really want him to turn it around. I really wish he were playing better. I had such high hopes for him this year. I'm not going to bet him. I just want to call him out a little bit. And other than that, yeah, it gets awfully dark. I mean, Christo Lamprecht just has not worked at all. two guys I'll point out, and they're guys I like and know. So Adam Schenk 750-1 has been playing a little bit better lately, but Brian Campbell at 775-1 intrigues me because this isn't a long golf course at all for him. Go play the U.S. Open when you can barely get to the fairway, kind of Corey Pavin of the 21st century. But here, I think he can contend, and he's a very good ball striker. He could surprise the world here. That would be my only super long shot. Like last week, we had a very small win bet in a top 20 on Troy Merritt, and that was a fun sweat. I think that would be kind of the way I would go after Brian Campbell this week is that number. And to win and a top 10, you still get a very nice payday, or a top 20, depending on what your tolerance is, I suppose, for those things. I want to talk about a couple of guys that are just playing well lately. Obviously, Ludwig is in his last four events, or last five or six PGA Tour events played, if you want to count the Oppos. He has 4 top 8 finishes. Like, clearly, that's why people are betting him. But why wouldn't you then go play a top 5 on him, or a top 10? And just get a little plus money and not get your heart broken when, it might not work out in the end. Just saying. Bouchot, great week at the Nelson, as we talked about. A couple other guys, I'm just kind of going through my list here. Eric Cole, we did talk about. A couple of top 15s of late. Ricky Fowler has been great. 8th, 9th, and runner-up. He's done very, very well for himself in the signature events of the last few weeks. Obviously, this is not a signature event, but he's done well for himself. Ben Griffin's got a couple of top 15 finishes on 2 very different golf courses between Trump Doral, the Blue Monster, and Aronimink. I think that can kind of favor his style of game. We did mention Tom Hoagie, that 6th place at the Nelson, kind of a get-off-the-mat kind of thing. Sungjae Im's been playing pretty well. 9th and a 5th in his last 3 starts. That's pretty good. But again, seems to kind of struggle keeping it together long enough, for all 4 days. Then, other than that, Bobby Mack finished, but that was a while ago. That doesn't count on the list. Matt McCarty is playing well. Played well in all of the signature events. And I don't see a reason why that can't continue. I like Ryan Gerard's game a little bit more for this golf course. I kind of think of those guys the same. I don't know why. But Matt McCarty is playing very, very good golf at a pretty similar number. So I could convince myself to go bet him this week. Then, other than that, I think that is all the guys I wanted to mention here that are in the field this week. Yeah, that's everybody. So those are your top 15 trends. Look at tournament history. So let's go back to 2020. When they came back from the COVID pause. Guys who have won this tournament: Daniel Berger, Jason Kokrak, Sam Burns, Emiliano Grillo, Davis Riley. The year Emiliano Grillo won, Harry Hall probably should have won, and Ben Griffin. We're not talking about long players here. Kokrak could hit it, but so can Burns and Berger, but that's not like the strength of their games. It really is short game and ball striking on this golf course. And to that end, let's talk about course fit. So looking at Colonial, the breakout is about 29% putting, 71% tee to green. Compare that to a lot of other places on the PGA Tour. There are very few places on the PGA Tour where the putting number percentage-wise is in the 20s. So kind of unique in that regard. Obviously more emphasis on ball striking at that point. And some of those fits this week include Brian Harmon, Gary Woodland. Gary Woodland is a great one. If you want to break it down a little bit more than that, not just tee to green versus putting, but also driving is about 23, 24%. Iron play is about 26%. Then you're around the green number, adding those two together, 24 and 26, 50. So 21% around the green. So a fairly balanced tee to green attack is going to do pretty well. But I would emphasize, obviously, the iron play a little bit more. Ricky figures into that a fair amount. And then Mark Hubbard fits into it by like an extreme degree. He's not a great driver of the golf ball, though. That's kind of his problem. Davis Riley is a winner here, obviously. He kind of fits that mold. Ryan Gerard fits that mold a little bit to an extreme. Again, not the best driver of the golf ball, but also just kind of has that style. Matt McCarty's really interesting because he's got such a killer short game. He's not the best driver of the golf ball, but he's not poor. He just kind of does everything really well. It's why his game travels really, really nicely. And Again, I could talk myself into picking him. Ben Griffin really relies on putting. He's not the best driver of the golf ball, but he can get into play clearly well enough here to win. And then Eric Cole is one of those, we mentioned him earlier. I'll tell you why. He's one of the few people on this list with negative strokes gained percentage-wise driving. That's atrociously bad. That's why the same reason why you don't pick Christian Bezaden-Hoyt most weeks. Such a bad driver of the golf ball. But then you look at like an Adam Schenk, who we mentioned earlier. When he plays well, he is okay enough off the tee. He's not the best driver of the golf ball, but man, he strikes his iron so well. So anyway, those are some potential course fits for this week. And I also want to talk about guys with good course history. So not just the guys who have won, but guys who have played well in, recent memory. Let me pull that up here. It didn't load up quickly enough in the pre-podcast stuff. So if you look at going back to 2021, there aren't a ton of people who play this golf course well consistently that are actually playing here this week. In fact, there are very few. Emiliano Grillo came in 8th here in 2021. He won 2 years later. Harry Hall's played well here 2 of the last 3 years, 3rd and 6th. I get that. Sanjay Im's played well here 2 of the last 4 years, 9th and 15th. And go down to Mac Meisner at 5th here in 2024. Again, I see the parallels between playing well at the Dunes and here. I think that carries over. I think they're like courses. Davis Riley's played well here. Obviously won. And other than that, Gary Woodland is your only other multiple top 15 finisher in the last whatever number of years. So, 14th and 11th, 21 and 25. And obviously the last couple of years have been a little strange. So take that for what it is. That all said, I think that covers everything related to the Charles Schwab Challenge in terms of, just kind of field stuff, general feel for the golf course, all the usual suspects. I do want to bring up a couple of other things before we get into a few seconds on LIV and on the LPGA. And I do want to get into kind of the usual things about variance and the short-term form that we typically talk about. So we want to talk about strokes gained tee to green variance. We're looking for guys who are playing well consistently tee to green. Putting is the variable that changes so much week to week. I mean, Wyndham Clark, for God's sake, gained 12 strokes putting last week. That was why he won. He putted lights out. He doesn't usually putt lights out. So, that was the hang-up. You need a week like that to be able to win. But if you're a consistent tee to green player, then I know to expect something from you that just kind of makes sense. That it makes a more sensible bet. I don't feel like you're reaching as much if you're looking at someone who just kind of does the same things pretty well, every week. So guys with high strokes gained tee to green averages in going back the last 30 events and low variance. So those guys are Chris Kirk, Russell Henley, Mac Meisner, Doug Gim, Keith Mitchell, Davis Thompson, Ricky Fowler, Sudarshan Yella-Maraju. Those guys are a lot of guys we've talked about. Hideki is up there as well, though his tee to green is not quite as good as it typically is. But, that does have variance over 30 events. Now, want to also just point out a couple of guys who, if you care for derivative bets, and I know some of you love them, looking at top 20 percentages, guys above 45% in the last 50 events played, there really aren't that many in this field. And Ben Griffin's one of them. Ricky Fowler's one of them. Ludwig is one of them, but barely. Russell Henley is probably the pick of the litter at 65% of the time. So if you're looking for anyone kind of hanging around close, Sudarshan is at 43%, 42% for Pearson Coody, for Bobby Mack as well. Hideki, 40% of the time is in the top 20. Anyone that's kind of an interesting value doesn't really just scream out to me here. No, sometimes some weeks you get something that just doesn't make any sense. You got to bet it, but we don't have that here this week. Also want to talk about the short term form that we talk about every week. which is kind of the graphic we typically use for those 3 columns, where we're looking at strokes gained in the aggregate, quality strokes gained, which is a measure we created that multiplies strokes gained by a multiple determined by the quality of your competition as measured by the official World Golf Ranking, and then on the approach. So we don't have a lot of guys this week in these categories. By the total category, we have 4 guys, which is crazy. Ludwig Aubert, Paul Peterson, who is playing well, just against crappy competition. Hayden Springer, playing well against crappy competition. And Alex Smalley, who's playing well against pretty much anybody. By the quality strokes gained measure, there are 3 guys. Wow. Ludwig, Alex Smalley, and Russell Henley. Russell Henley doesn't qualify on the aggregate measure, but he's playing great competition, so he's pretty close. On the approach, obviously this is Ludwig's bread and butter. There are 4 guys who would qualify based on that, and this is kind of the separate measure that I do. It says, all right, well, if you're hitting it well on the approach, then you can pick up putting. You can get better at driving for a week. Maybe it doesn't suit your eye, but those are the variables. The iron play doesn't really change much. So Ludwig, Mark Hubbard, who again is struggling putting mightily, but there's less of an emphasis on that this week. That's good. Tom Kim, again, horrible putter, and JJ Spawn, horrible putter. So, do you go after those guys because they're playing better, they're putting a little bit better? Some of those guys have had those turnouts, but it makes them hard to bet. But I do think Mark Hubbard is an interesting play, just given how close he got to it at the Dunes. But then again, the putting was what got him in the end. I think that's everything related to Charles Schwab Challenge for this week. Yeah, I think that's going to cover it all. Yeah. That'll do it. That'll do it. All right. Okay. Let's get into a couple of minutes about the Live Golf event and the LPGA event. So we got Live in Korea this week. We've got the DP World Tour also at the Austrian Alpine Open, which I think is a cool name. And then the ShopRite LPGA on the LPGA. So let's talk about Live Golf first. They're in Korea, second year for this event. We know this is a 2-man tour. That is okay. I still think that there are some interesting values coming out of the PGA Championship. How long does the run good extend from playing well at the PGA? For example, Cam Smith, 37-1. He hit it all over the map. I mean, just awful driving at the PGA. It still made it work. I don't know if you'll have that same luxury in Busan, but I think it may apply here. I probably will play him. Jesle Ballester, I think, is interesting at 28-1. The other guy I think I would recommend here is Abe Answer at 40-1. He has been over here already. He played the Korean Open last week. He finished, I think, runner-up against a very weak field. But he did finish runner-up. 40-1, I think, is an interesting play here on him this week. Also, side note, the Korean Open winner gets like 40% of the purse. It is insane. I cannot believe the payouts for that tournament. I thought it was incredible. So yeah, I think those are the guys to look for. And, Caleb Surratt played on the DP World Tour last week and, made the cut, but didn't do particularly well. But it might be an interesting look, just a guy who's been active. These guys that are on Live that if they played Virginia but didn't get into the PGA Championship, they've been off for 3 weeks, basically. 2 weeks, I guess, off. 3 weeks off, depending on how you look at it. That's a long time to be off. And I know that these guys are incredible and that they pick it back up quickly, but that's a long time. So I would stay away from Rahm and Bryson and Neiman. David Pooch is going to get some play this week, but I'm not going to play him at 13-1. I would go look at probably Cam Smith, Abe Answer, and Ballester, I guess. That would be it for me here this week. I will do an article on this. There has been a weird shuffling of the Korean Golf Club. Ben On basically kicked out Danny Lee out of the team and put another guy on, who I don't know anything about, but he's like 204th in the world. Trying to kind of remember that guy's name. I saw it yesterday. Do Yub Moon is 75th 6-1, making his debut this week. I think the guys making their debuts on LIV tend to do well. Maybe it'd be interesting on the top 10 or 20, and he's playing in Korea, so you would think that the guys on the Korean Golf Club would be a little amped up. They've basically been horrible on LIV this year, and maybe they'll kind of show up this week. A couple things about the LPGA event, the ShopRite Classic, up at Seaview Resort in Galloway Township, which is just across the water from Atlantic City. Shout out to the Borgata. This is an interesting tournament because it's a 3-round event, for one, and 2, it's played on a Donald Ross course that is exceptionally tight for a lot of players. It is not, you have to put the ball in play and you have to not spray it. If you spray it, especially on the front side, you are in such deep trouble. But if you keep it in play, you can do pretty well. And so I think that opens the door to some interesting players who can win, like Celine Boutier. I think she's pretty accurate off the tee, 19-1. Good approach player. I think you want to think about approach play here this week. But then the other problem is you have this is the weakest field of the year for the LPGA, unfortunately. It's one of the longest running tournaments. It's a great tournament, but it is not a good field. And so if you're looking at, I'm trying to pull up the LPGA website so you can see it. Strokes gained, tee to green. So that's really what I care about this year. And year to date. So in the field this week, we don't have a lot of these players because most of them are skipping it. But Jung-Hoon Lee 6 is playing really well. She has not played much, but she's played very well in her limited tee to green stuff. Again, otherwise of players this field, Aki Y is 21st in strokes gained, tee to green this season. She would be a logical play. She's also 16-1. Like, you're not getting a lot of value out of that. Maybe you want to go look at, you're going to go really far down the list here. Jody Ewart-Shadoff has been very good this year, tee to green. It's around the green that's been horrible, but she's 34th on the tour or T34, I guess I should say, in strokes gained tee to green. So that makes her kind of an interesting figure here this week. Maybe you look at... Jenny Bay's not even playing. That's kind of surprising. This would be a golf course that's right up her alley. Other than that, I really don't have a lot of recommendations. Maybe Chiara Tamberlini at 82-1 because she has really... She's procured her craft on LET courses that kind of play tight like this, but she has struggled so much tee to green this year. It's bad to the neg. But that's what you kind of have to know about the value of the tournament this week. Someone who is losing 1.3 strokes tee to green on average this season per round is 82-1. So the value here is extremely tough to come by. Probably Aki Y, Celine Boutier, call it a day. Maybe Cassie Porter at 40-1. Shut it down. That's probably it for that. Arpachaya Ubal, who I saw in Cincinnati for the first time play golf in person. I really like her game a lot. I don't know if that's going to work particularly well here, but I do like her game a lot. I really like Jin Yang a lot. Saw her very up close playing the Pro-Am in Cincinnati. I really like her game a lot. She's got the capability. She's 30 years old. She's been around. Like this isn't her first rodeo, but she's got the capability. I think to do well in a tournament like this. If you look at her season to date, she had one good finish, the JM Eagle LA Championship, which is played on a relatively tight golf course. So, if her best finish in the year is a course like that, maybe that's where you need to go with it. So, Jin Yang at, 75-1 is a good play. DP World Tour, Austrian Open, Sepp Straka coming home to his native Austria, even though he's really from Valdosta, Georgia. 9-1 to win here this week. Casey Jarvis would probably be my first play. He's 21.5-1. Continues to play well. He played well last week in the Soudal Open. Not spectacular, but well enough. This is a tour where a guy who hadn't won in 13 years won last week. And a guy before that, in the tournament before that, won by 14 strokes for his biggest professional win at like 22 years old. Weird stuff happens on the DP World Tour. So just when you think the normal thing is going to happen, something strange happens. So, do you go look at like an MJ Defoe, who's played pretty well here this year and carries himself pretty well? Bernd Wiesberger won this year. He would be kind of interesting. Beef Johnston. I mean, he might like something like this. But it's very hard for me to... the guy who won last week is 120 to 1 this week. Richard Sterney's 120 to 1. That's bananas. Oh my gosh. Europe Premlaw is 100 to 1. The guy won 2 weeks ago or 2 tournaments ago. That's bananas. It's just such an impossible tour to predict. If you have a beat on it, you're a special kind of human being. But that'll be what I avoid. All right, that's, I think, everything here this week. And kind of went a little all over the place on a couple of things. But hopefully you stayed with me, and I appreciate you doing that. We'll be back next week with another slate of shows. We'll talk about the Memorial, which is kind of the big event of the week. We'll get ready for the U.S. Open. We've got the U.S. Women's Open next week at Riviera, which is going to be absolutely awesome. Can't wait to see that on TV. We'll talk about that a little bit. Of all of the courses maybe on the PGA Tour, I probably understand Riviera the best. In the history of doing the show, history of doing predictions, that's the golf course I nail the winner the most. So hopefully we'll have something good for you for the U.S. Women's Open next week. If you have questions, get a hold of me, Ryan at thegolfnewsnet.com. I am at Ryan Ballingy Golf on Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok. And you can join Golf Newsnet for $40 for 1 year, $70 for 2 years, or $100 for 3 years at golfnewsnet.com. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. Good luck with all your bets this week. And we will see you next time right here on The Press.